All right. Good afternoon and good evening, everyone, from wherever you're joining. I think I have a couple of folks online also, I see. Welcome to the session on PowerShell 4.0. And thanks to Singapore user group, Matt and Ben, especially for having me today to share the knowledge with you folks. So like Matt said, we will be looking at some enhancements and new features in PowerShell 4.0. There's not a whole lot, but we will see some exciting new feature which is there in PowerShell 4.0, right? Yeah, before we get started, thanks to the sponsors who made this happen today. I've used Sapient PowerShell Studio, such a nice tool for building the GUIs for your PowerShell scripts, etc. If you have not tried, give it a try. You can just download the trial version and use it for developing your scripts or GUIs for your scripts, etc. It's a great tool. All right, so moving on, a little bit about me. I work for Dell Incorporation. I'm a lead engineer for the Microsoft Collaboration Solutions. I've been a PowerShell MVP since 2010, and I founded PowerShell Magazine, which is the exclusive online magazine for Windows PowerShell. Apart from all that, like Matt and Ben, I also lead the Bangalore IT Pro and PowerShell user groups. Right, so that's briefly about me. Let's get started with our agenda today. If you have any questions while I'm speaking, feel free to drop a note on IM or let Matt enable the microphone for you, and you can actually speak there itself. We can have an interactive discussion, right, instead of having a one-way discussion from my side. All right, so PowerShell version 4 at present is in preview build, which is available for download. As WMF 4.0, that is Windows Management Framework 4.0. PowerShell has always been a part of Windows Management Framework because it depends on components like Windows Remote Management and Windows Management Instrumentation, that is WMI, etc., and the PowerShell Web Services. In WMF 4.0, PowerShell Engine, ISE, and PowerShell Web Services are updated. WinRM and WMI did not change in the preview build. It might in the later builds, which is not known yet. So in today's session, we will look at what is new in 4.0, the PowerShell engine and the language point of view. There are a couple of bug fixes in PowerShell ISE, and there's nothing significant that has changed in the ISE editor. So we will not go there at all. PowerShell Web Services also, it's kind of an OData management provider that requires its own dedicated session. We will not talk about all that happened in web services, but I'll show you a bit of it where we see a demo of PowerShell Web Access, some of the things that have changed in PowerShell Web Access. Okay, so the focus of our discussion will be mostly some of those minor enhancements in PowerShell 4.0 and the biggest feature in PowerShell 4.0, which is desired state configuration. Okay. So before we go there, these are some of the requirements. You can install PowerShell 4.0, that is WMF 4.0 on Windows Server 2008 R2 SP1 or Win 7 SP1 or Server 2012. You will require .NET 4.5, which is a mandatory requirement. And this is not available for Windows 8 yet, which it's not there at all. So you won't be able to install the updates for Server 2012 on Windows 8. It's not supported. And also, once you install PowerShell 4.0, it replaces the 3.0 engine completely, 3.0 PowerShell engine completely. So any commands that you run with a hyphen version parameter, for example, PowerShell.exe hyphen version 3, you will get redirected to 4.0 engine because 4.0 is completely backward compatible with 3.0. Okay. So what's new? Like I said, nothing major as such. It's not really like PowerShell 3.0 where we had several new features and enhancements. In PowerShell 3.0 they introduced a lot of stuff, including PowerShell workflows, etc. But PowerShell 4.0 has minor changes to the existing commandlets and adds a new configuration management framework called desired state configuration. So far this is the biggest addition that we have seen in PowerShell 4.0 space. Otherwise, most of the other changes are pretty minor, of course useful changes, and there are a lot of bug fixes that they have done from 3.0 and 2.0 areas. Right. And most of some of the language additions are there. For example, you can create your own keywords now. DSC is based on a lot of new keywords based design, so we will see a bit about that as well, right? So in the next few slides, first what we will do is I'll walk through some of the enhancements and the smaller changes that happen to the language, and then we will look at desired state configuration. We will spend more time on DSC, quickly finish the smaller minor topics, and then we'll go there. So this is one of the change in PowerShell 4.0, right? So before PowerShell 4.0, if you had a script that requires administrative privileges or elevated console, we used to check that using a .NET namespace and look if the script is running with elevated privileges or the console is open as administrator, running as administrator that we do. But with 4.0, it's much more easier. You can use the hash requires. This is the construct that we use now. You might have used this for stuff like hash requires hyphen version and the version number, or hash requires hyphen modules and the list of modules that you want to load, or the script depends on, etc. Similarly to that, we have now hash requires hyphen run as administrator. Okay, so once you have this at the first line or any part of the script, the script will be checking, the PowerShell engine will be checking if your console is elevated or not, or the PowerShell host where you're running this script is elevated or not, or has the administrative privileges or not, and then only it runs the remaining part of the script. Okay, so let's quickly see that. Alright, so this is the script I have. I'm not running the console as elevated. You can clearly see that. I don't have administrator written here, so that basically means I'm not in an elevated console. So when I try to run this script, so this is what I see. Right, it basically tells me hash required statement for running as administrator. The current Windows PowerShell session is not running as administrator. Simple. So you don't have to really take the put the effort of using those .NET namespaces and checking whether the logged in role is an admin role or not, etc. Right. So if I'm in an administrator console, for example, this console I opened is elevated. So from here, if I run that, it runs basically because I have the administrator privileges. I've elevated the PowerShell console as administrator. Right. It runs and basically tells me whatever string I've put there, which is test script requires administrative privileges, etc. Right. So that's one of the enhancements, very minor enhancement, but pretty useful enhancement there. So moving on, I talked about PowerShell Web Access. Not sure how many of you really implemented PowerShell Web Access in Server 2012. But the earlier versions of the PowerShell Web Access had no option to disconnect and connect from an existing session. So if you have used PowerShell 3.0 remoting, you would have used commandlets like connect PS session and disconnect PS session. So they basically used to connect and disconnect to and connect to a PowerShell remoting session without losing the context of the session, right? So you must be running a very long script inside that session, and if you in PowerShell 2.0, if you disconnect from that session, the entire script or the task that you are running inside that session would be lost, right? So 3.0, you had that option of disconnecting from a previous session and then connecting to it again. So that same capability was not available inside PowerShell Web Access, right? PowerShell Web Access is a web browser-based PowerShell console. You can connect to a remoting endpoint on a server where Web Access endpoint is running, and you can execute commands from there, right? So with PowerShell 4.0, Microsoft has enabled that. Let's see what it is. Alright, so here I have the Web Access installed. I'll go to the sign in page. I've given access to my administrator account, so I should be able to log in with that. This is my Server 2012 R2 system. This is where I've enabled the PowerShell Web Access. I sign in there, I get this command prompt lookalike. So let's put a variable here, $name equals to Ravi. Okay, maybe we'll store processes also, $proc equals to get process. Okay, so now I have two variables created here. What I can do is to disconnect from the session but still preserve what I have done in the session. I can just say save, click on save and exit. When I go next, I can log in again. Imagining that you are logging in from a different system. Basically ask me, see there is a disconnected session which is saved. I can click on that and go to that saved session and I can get my variables back. Right. So this is update that Microsoft added to PowerShell 4.0 Web Access, PowerShell Web Access. Okay. And you can also, for example, if you go to this sign-in page, you will see the optional connection settings. Okay. So if you want to have some default values, these are the default values already. WSMan always runs at 5985 port number. But if you want to change any of these parameters, earlier there was no capability, but now you can go edit the web.config file for PowerShell Web Access and then provide these default values to your users, so they don't have to explicitly change any of these things. Okay. So that's about PowerShell Web Access. And the next thing is the pipeline variable, right? So let's look at this. PowerShell 4.0, every commandlet, if you see, there's a -pipeline variable, which is a common parameter that is added to all the commandlets. Okay. So let's see an example to understand that better. Instead of me talking about that, we'll just see an example for that. Okay. If you see here, I have a command pipeline here. What I'm doing is I'm getting the scripts folder contents using get child item, using the -recurse there, and then I'm piping that to a commandlet called get ACL, which basically gets me the ACL object, the access control list object for each of those files, and then it just gives me the access property. Okay, the access property that is returned by get ACL commandlet. Now what happens here is, let's run this and see. Right, if you see this output here, we have lost the context. We have lost the context of what we have done in the first command. For example, I'm doing a get child item on scripts folder. I'm doing it in a recursive manner. But this ACL, what you see here, belongs to a particular file. But in the output here, I don't really see what is that file, right? So the context is lost. The context that you had in the first command here, which is lost completely by the time you reach the end of the pipeline, or anywhere in between the pipelines, right? So that is something that is solved using pipeline variable. So -pv, or you can put pipeline variable. Now what happens, see, this is the same thing, get child item. I'm doing the same command again on C:\documents, Dropbox and scripts in a recursive way. What I've done is I created a new pipeline variable. I call it file, and I'm looking for all PS1 files. And I'm actually doing the same thing here. I'm doing a get ACL, and for each access property which is coming out of get ACL commandlet, look at what I'm doing here. I'm taking that output from for each access, which is the access property that I have, and I'm adding a script property to it using the pipeline variable. So I create the context again. Let's see how it works. Now if you see, I've added a path variable which has the file path that this ACL basically belongs to. Okay, so this is where I recreated the context. I lost it as a part of the pipeline conversion when the output passed from one command to another command. The context of the first command is lost. Now I can recreate that context by actually using the pipeline variable. So this is how the pipeline variable is useful, especially in iterative scripts. Like where you, for example, the system center orchestrator. When you have to use this kind of a pipeline or a PowerShell scripts inside the data bus of your orchestrator, that is where the pipeline variable will be most useful. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay, let's move on then. All right, so the next one, a minor modification again, I would say, and not my favorite. Again, many people oppose to it, and many people have different views about this particular feature. It's called method syntax for collection filtering. Okay, so in PowerShell 3.0 we had this simplified syntax where you could pipe something to where, and without using the curly brackets and the input variable of $_ etc. we could do filtering of a collection, or what is coming out from the first command into the second command. We could do that filtering using that simplified syntax. Now with PowerShell 4.0, actually this is something that can be done in PowerShell 3.0 also, but it surfaced in PowerShell 4.0 first because of the desired state configuration module. We will see that in a bit. But what you can do with this is, if you have something like, let's say over here. So for this feature to get become available, you need to import PS desired state configuration. I'll also show you how to use it outside of DSC module also. First, let's load that. Once I load that, I'll be able to run this. See the way I'm using where keyword here or the method here, right? Get child item C::del recurse, and I'm saying where PS is container equals to true. Let's run that. Yes. So it basically gets me all the folders within C::del folder directory. Okay. If you look at the method or this method definition, basically, if you look at this, it's basically a script. It's a script method, which you can clearly see here. It's a member type script method, and this is what the definition is. Okay. And if you closely observe this, the number of supported operators, conditional operators, are very less here, right? For example, the operators like -in, -not in, -contains, and all those operators are not supported in this method. Okay, and also the usage is limited to a single operator. For example, I cannot do something like -and full name like something. I cannot do this. This is not supported. You can only use a single operator comparison operator here, like this. Okay, and also if you understand the where object, the way it functions in a classic where object usage, what I can do is I can do something like where PS is container, right? This is the simplified syntax. Okay, so when I do that, I get the same output again. But in this case, if you see when I'm using where as a method for method syntax for collection filtering, I have to explicitly specify -equals and then $true. Okay, without this command will fail. Okay, so there are a lot of limitations. No wonder this is not a very useful method of doing collection filtering, but it exists within the PowerShell 4.0 space if you actually import this desired state configuration module. If you actually open the desired state configuration module, you can see that yourself. Let me go to that module and show you very quickly what it is. So the desired state configuration module is in the system module path. You can see all these module files here. If you open this and search for update type data, see, this is the code snippet that is actually creating the where method we just saw for the content filtering, collection filtering, right? So if I copy this and put it in my shell where I have not imported the PowerShell desired state configuration module, I should still be able to do what I have done there. Get process where yeah. So I have not imported the desired state configuration module here, but still I just use this method, and then I was able to do that. So that's one of the reasons why I said this is possible in PowerShell 3.0 also, right? If you take the same code chunk from here and put it in your PowerShell 3.0 session, it will work, and you can actually use that where method in PowerShell 3.0 also. Okay. Again, one more way of doing things in PowerShell, but may not be the right or the efficient way of doing things. Because, like I said, not all operators are supported. It supports only a single comparison operator, etc. Okay, let's move on. In PowerShell 3.0 and in the later other older versions also, we had the dynamic property names. Dynamic properties could always you could always use those dynamic property names. For example, something like if I do -prop equals, let's say, handle count, and then if I do get process, this is called a dynamic property. I'm using a variable name here instead of a real property name. That variable actually contains the property name that I want to gather. So I just use the variable name instead of the property name. So I can dynamically create these property names based on a condition, etc. But we could not do the same thing with methods. So there was no way to invoke dynamic methods, and that is what is available now in PowerShell 4.0. See this code snippet here. We're creating FSO object, which is a scripting.filesystem object, and then we're doing a get child item, and for each object, if it is a folder, we're basically setting this $ method to get folder, else we're setting it to get file. Okay, so the method name is what is this, get folder method or a get file method, and we decide that based on the container value, PSE's container, whether it's true or false, and then we call the method, $method, which is the dynamically created method now, the get folder or get file, and then pass it the full name of the object that you are receiving from get child. So this is the way we actually can invoke methods dynamically in PowerShell 4.0. Right? So basically gives me that. That's it. So you just have to remember this, right? So the way we were doing the dynamic properties, the same way we can actually create dynamic methods also, and this is how you invoke those dynamic methods. Okay. And then moving on. Like I said, these are all the very minor features. Let's not spend much time here. We'll spend more time on DSC, understanding that more in depth, and spend more time where it is useful. So in PowerShell 3.0 and all, if you have to do hashing, file hashing, for different reasons, if you're copying a large file or large set of files from one system to another system, you want to make sure that the destination system, all the files are copied without any corruption, right? So in that process, what we do is we take a hash of all the files before the copy and hash of the files after the copy, and then try to compare to see whether the files are reached safely without any corruption, etc., to the destination computer. So for that, there are many hashing algorithms like MD5, SHA1, SH512, etc. For that, we had to use .NET namespaces for each of those hashing algorithms, and then calculate the hash yourself, etc. With PowerShell 4.0, there's a built-in command called get file hash, That's what you see here. Right, so this is how we did that in PowerShell 3.0 without using the built-in commandlet. Basically gives you, sorry. Path is invalid. Let's see why. I have that file. Let's check that very quickly. I do have a file. Let's do it here. Get file hash mirror sp1 hyphen algorithm. I want to use MD5 and then select hash. Right. I get that file hash. I don't know why the .NET namespace thing was not working. What's wrong with that? Okay. Simple errors, right? That should work. Yeah. Right. So as you see, the hash is same. Of course, the formatted the way the .NET namespace formatted in the commandlet format is different. But the hash, if you actually compare them, they're fine. They're the same, right, for the MD5 hash. Okay. So that's another thing. You don't have to use these .NET namespaces and then look through all the provider names, etc. yourself. You can just use the get file hash commandlet and do it yourself. It's pretty easy in PowerShell 4.0. Other changes, like I said, very minor changes. Get process has a username now, the user who started the process. For that, you have to use the elevated PowerShell console. It cannot be done from the normal console. So, for example, if I have elevated console here, I can say get process hyphen include username. So this is only available in PowerShell 4.0, the hyphen include username parameter. I can do that and basically tells me who started the process. It's pretty useful for those people who are creating audit reports and debugging some kind of troubleshooting issues remotely, etc. This will be quite useful, right? The username you can see here. Okay. And other changes, of course, you can do remote and workflow script debugging in PowerShell IAC. Remote script debugging was never there in IAC. That is something that got added in PowerShell 4.0, which is pretty good. If you write a lot of scripts that work on remote systems, you want to use PowerShell remoting to run these scripts and then troubleshoot if any problems arise in between, then you can actually use PowerShell IAC to do remote script debugging. Other minor changes to the schedule jobs, you have run now and repeat indefinitely. Those parameters supported now for these commandlets that I listed there. And of course, you can add a computer or remove a computer from a work group, which was not there in 3.0. Now you have that in 4.0. So the link I specified here has all the other changes and bug fixes. Go through that list. Nothing very major unless you focus a lot on workflows, etc. There are some changes within, the bug fixes within workflows feature set. You can actually go through that list at the link I specified there. Alright, so this is the biggest thing, right, in PowerShell 4.0. So let's spend more time here. The desired state configuration. It is a management platform or a framework for configuration management within a data center. For example, in the data centers, you have hundreds and thousands of servers. So configuration drift is not a surprise to anyone there, right? So you create a baseline configuration for all these similar server roles you have, like web servers or database servers, etc. You might have a baseline configuration that is created every time you provision one of these roles. You want that server role to be at the same baseline configuration. You can ensure that today using provisioning software. Many of the provisioning software can be used to achieve that baseline configuration, right? But over time, what happens is there are these different set of administrators. There's one guy who's doing network administration, there's one guy doing hypervisor administration, there's one guy doing storage administration, etc. And there's one person for the application administration on the host or the guest OS or whatever. Over time, these people tend to change configuration aspects of the operating system or the applications. Okay, so that is where the configuration drift comes into picture. So after a while, you created the baseline, and after a while, if you go compare the configuration of the servers that are hosting similar roles, you will definitely see a difference in configuration between these servers, right? The physical servers or virtual servers, whatever it could be. Now, the provisioning methods that we have cannot really take care of the aspects of identifying whether there's a configuration drift and rolling it back, etc. So that is where the configuration management tools come into picture. Okay, configuration management is nothing new. There are many other frameworks and tools like Puppet, Chef, and CF Engine, etc. Most of you might have used some of these tools. They all do the same thing in probably a different way. Right, so Puppet uses its own language. Chef has, I think, Ruby support, etc. So they create recipes, they apply those recipes, etc. onto the target nodes to make sure the configuration is intact and that there is no configuration drift, etc. Now, I'm not going to compare these different products today. That is certainly not the intention, and I don't have any experience with other tools than DSC. So let's not go there comparing these different frameworks. Talking about DSC, DSC is a framework for managing configuration across hundreds and thousands of servers. I already said that, right? So DSC provides language extensions. I said, you can add different keywords. That capability is provided here. And then you can use built-in resources. We'll see what are resources and what is configuration, etc. in a later slide. And for now, understand that you can use built-in resources for configuration of software elements. Could be folders, files, Windows features and roles. It could be registry, etc. Okay, and then DSC has several commandlets to manage DSC itself. You can start DSC configuration. You can get DSC configuration. You can set DSC configuration and test, basically like DSC configuration to ensure that the target node still has the same configuration that was applied earlier, etc. And it's a mean. It provides a mean to maintain and manage configuration. We will see different methods of doing that. In the internals of our desired state configuration, they use PowerShell remoting. So you should have PowerShell remoting enabled on the nodes that you want to manage using desired state configuration. Okay, that is the prerequisite. And it uses something called declarative syntax. Okay. Now let's talk a bit about the declarative syntax, right? Declarative syntax, when I was first told DSC uses declarative syntax, and it's not the exact way PowerShell is, right? PowerShell is imperative in nature. So I was wondering, I'm not a developer, so I was wondering, what is the difference between imperative and declarative syntax? The difference is very simple, right? Imperative basically means how a task needs to be performed. In the imperative syntax, you basically specify how a task needs to be performed, right? PowerShell is imperative by design. Declarative syntax or the approach basically tells us, you just specify what is the task that you want to perform. Rest of it, how it has to be performed, is taken care by the automation engine that is sitting beneath the declarative configuration or whatever, right? So automation engine takes care of translating what you need to do into how it needs to be done. Okay, so let's quickly see an example of that. Yes, so take this example. What essentially we are doing here is we are importing the server manager module. We know that it's used for the Windows feature and roles configuration, and then we are seeing if ASP.NET 4.5 feature is installed or not. If it is not installed, we are adding it, and then we are checking if web server feature is installed or not. If it is not installed, we are adding that feature. Okay. Now, if you see, I've explicitly coded the error handling here. What should happen when add Windows feature fails? What should happen when add Windows feature web server fails, right? All that error handling is explicitly coded. And how we are checking for this? See, we are actually using get Windows feature commandlet, and then we are checking the install property whether it's true or not. Okay, we are explicitly making all these checks. So this is imperative in nature. And then we come here, then we do the add PS snap in web administration, we create a new website, and then start the website. So we are at every point in this code, we are basically specifying how it needs to be done, and at the same time we achieve what needs to be done. Okay, so that is imperative syntax in PowerShell, and that's how PowerShell is designed by default, right? When it comes to the declarative syntax, this is how it appears. Nowhere in this code segment here, we're basically specifying how it needs to be done. What we essentially are saying is what needs to be done. Right? So here I'm saying Windows feature IIS, and then I say ensure it is present. I'm not saying how it has to be ensured that it is present. And I'm saying what feature has to be installed. I'm not specifying how it needs to be installed. Okay? All these aspects, and I'm again specifying to create a website, and then saying this is how it should be. The physical path of website is this. It should be in start mode. I'm not even saying how to start the website, and it has to be bound to port 80, etc. So this is declarative syntax. The desired state configuration feature in PowerShell 4.0 uses declarative syntax. Okay, so you need to understand this because this is how the configuration documents will be written when you use desired state configuration. Okay, and this is now that I have introduced declarative syntax, this is the example or the how DSC syntax is. Configuration, we talked about it, it's a keyword. Okay, and this is a name, which is very similar to the way you write functions in PowerShell. You write function name, and then you open the curly brackets, close them, and in between that, you write all the logic that is required for your function. Very similar to that, you have this configuration snippet also here. Configuration script block, you have the configuration keyword, name of the configuration, and then inside that, you can have 0 or more node blocks. A node is the server. Okay, this is where the target this is the target server. You can specify it as a name here. For example, I can specify my web server is the computer name that I want to target for this particular configuration. Okay, and then what you see inside here is the resource. So Windows feature resource, I'm basically saying I'm giving it a name IIS, and these are all the different attributes that it takes. Okay, we will go more in depth when I talk about each and every resource, but for now understand that this is how it is structured. You have a outer configuration, and then inside that you have node, and inside node you have different resources. It need not be just Windows feature, it can be registry, it can be files, it can be archives, anything else. We will see that complete list. There are multiple built-in resources that Microsoft provides with the DSC module in PowerShell 4.0. Okay. So this is the difference between imperative and declarative syntax. Okay, you need to understand this before we get started with DSC itself. Okay, and then we just talked about the terminology aspects of it, right? So the configuration that you see in the topmost level, it's a keyword, and it basically defines a script block followed by an identifier. We saw that, which basically defines the configuration document. So inside that configuration block, you have the node that specifies the configuration for each node or computer in your environment. That's a right terminology for the data center folks, the server in your environment. And then inside that, you have a resource. Okay. So a resource basically tells what is that resource that you want to manage as a part of configuration management. It could be an application, it could be as simple as creating files or managing files on remote servers or a set of nodes, etc. Or it could be any of this list, what you see here. So you have multiple resources. These are the built-in resources. Archive basically talks about how do you use these zip files, etc. How do you you can take a zip file, extract it over multiple target computers using the archive resource. Environment resource, you can use that to create environment variables on the remote computers, right? And file can be used to manage files and folders. And group is basically local groups. You can create and delete local groups or modify local group settings, etc. Log is basically logging of your activities, where it should be logged and how it should be done, etc. Package is an interesting one. You can use this resource to deploy MSIs and setup.exe kind of a packages you have. Okay, if they support a silent installation, you can specify what is it and how it needs to be performed. You specify, you store that MSI file or setup.exe file at a location which is accessible to a remote computer, and then it will go deploy it there automatically for you. Okay. And process, you can check the process details. Registry, you can edit, delete or update the registry keys and values, etc. Role is the Windows feature role actually. So this is where we can deploy new roles, new features, Windows features, and modify the settings of those features, etc. Script is basically you can run scripts on target servers. So you can specify that as a resource also, and how it needs to be performed, all that can be specified. Service is again to deal with Windows services. User is to deal with the local users on remote computers. You can create, delete, and add them to groups, etc. You can do all that using user resource. And of course, it is possible to create custom resources. Like I showed you, PowerShell, the DSC module itself is a plain module. It's not a binary module, it's just a script module. Similarly, the resources are also script modules. You can actually create that module yourself. Right? If you want to create a custom resource, for example, to manage a specific application you have in your data center, the configuration of a specific application, or the how you want to manage your development and testing environment for a custom application, you can create your own resource. Okay, that resource can be basically created using a MOF schema. So that basically tells us these DSC resources are based on WMI. They use SIM instance. They use SIM basically to communicate with the remote servers, etc. Right? So you build a MOF schema to understand what is that resource that you are building, and then you create a module script. And that module script needs to have these three functions basically: get target resource, set target resource, and test target resource. So once you have, so there's a specific way you define. So on the technical documentation, you have a sample that you can go look at. It's pretty easy to build a custom resource. So you just have to implement these three functions, and as per the specification that's given there in the technical documentation, and you're all set. You can create your own custom resources and apply the configuration across multiple servers using DSC. Okay. So, and what you basically do is once you create a custom resource, you copy it to this location. C: Windows System 32, whatever folder, like PS providers. They call them PS providers, but they're actually resources. This is an older terminology. I'm not sure if they're going to update in the later builds, but PS providers is an older terminology. They're called actually resources. Okay. So before we go to the other aspects of how it really works and all, let's go look at some examples of DSC resources. So where do we start? Yeah. So I have an archive resource here. See the way it is. The syntax of that is I'm specifying configuration. This is my custom name. I'm just saying archive test, and within that I'm mentioning a node. This is my computer. This is actually my local computer, and I'm saying archive example. This is the name of the resource. This is the custom name of the resource element that I have given. So I'm basically saying ensure present. So when I say ensure present, the zip file that I have specified here will be taken and extracted to this folder, C: demo script. Suppose if I change it to absent, whatever is there at the C: demo script folder will be deleted. Okay, so that is the difference. And there are many other attributes here. You can place your cursor on archive here and press Control space bar. You'll actually see the complete list. Okay, it has requires, force, ensure, path, destination path, validate, checksum, etc. So you can use those attributes to do much more. We will see some of them in the later examples, but for now let's see how this can be run. So make sure I'm in the same folder. So what is the name of the file I've given? It's DSC-archive PS1. What I'll do is I'll just run that file. This is it. Okay. So what it basically does is it creates, with the node name I have specified, a MOF file, which is the schema or the WMI configuration document for this now. I can go inside and check. You can actually see, because it's a plain text document, you can open it in Notepad. Let's see what it is. So this is all it has. I basically created a MOF schema for whatever resource I specified, and now it needs to be applied. Okay, so that's what you see here. Destination path, ensure, present. Whatever you have put it in the configuration document, that gets converted into this. And one thing, if you have observed, the MOF file is named with the node name that you specified. Okay, if you have multiple node names specified there, there will be multiple MOF files for each of those. I mean, for each node name that you specified, there will be a MOF file, associated MOF file here. Okay, so that's how DSC works. Now, if I have to load this, I can say start DSC configuration. Let's use wait so that we see what's happening there, and verbose also. And then we'll say path. I just have to specify the path where the MOF file is located, which in my case is archive test. See? So observe what it has done. It has taken that, and then if you see the over here, it says the archive at c:\demo_script.zip was unpacked to destination c:\demoscript1. If I go and see there, it's there, right? It has some files I basically zipped. Okay. So that's how the archive resource is used. Now, again, very similar to that, the environment resource, we can run it and see again. Let's directly run it. I'll not go into the details of the configuration here. Let's simply run that and see DSC, so in a different folder. DSC environment, I just run that. Again, start. I can just specify the folder name that it created. It goes and sets the variable. Now if I go to my local server, I should be able to see that environment variable somewhere, right? So let's go to advanced environment variables, and you see that my host name. That is what we are setting here actually. So in the script, if you see, we are setting that my host name. Now let's see if the absent thing works or not. I'm changing it to absent. I want to remove that. Okay, so I just changed it to absent. Let's run this again. So you have to run the script again so that the MOF file gets created again. So it's created. Now let's run start DSC configuration. It should ideally remove it. I hope it works. I have not tested removing an environment variable this way. So yeah, it is removed. It's not there. Right. So that is the difference between present and absent in the properties of your configuration. I mean the resource. Right. So that's a general behavior for any type of resource. It could be environment variable or an archive or a file, etc. That is the standard behavior. And when you are creating custom resources also, you have to implement these attributes. Ensure equals to present, what should be done? Ensure equals to absent, what should be done? So your module basically that you create for your custom resource should carry the logic that is required to implement all these things. Okay. And this is a file test. So what we are essentially doing is we are taking the demo script folder and doing a recursive copy of that to demo script 1. First, let's make sure we delete this folder. Deleted that. Now let's run this. And then you say file test. See, it's all the standard mechanism, right? Once you have that idea of how to create those configuration documents and how to create the MOF files of configuration documents, and then using DSC configuration is always the same thing. Cannot find this file specified. Oh, there's an error there. Not sure what it is. Let's go and check. Demo script. This always happens, this is a beta release, several things are actually not working. For example, some of these scripts, I'm trying it on a local system, but I have, during my process of, building these demos and all, I wanted to test it against multiple computers where I have Server 2008 R2 with PowerShell 4.0, Server 2012 with PowerShell 4.0, etc. For some reason, it never worked for me when I tried remotely from Server 2012 R2 to 2008 R2 or 2012. So it always fails in that case. So that's why I resorted basically to running everything locally. And let's see why this is not working. I had this running. File test, we do that. So we don't have that folder, we have to create this again. DSC file got created. And then we do the file test. It still fails. Interesting. So it's basically referring to some other folder here. The related file directory can be SQL and demo script role test 1, which is not found probably. Let's go and see if it created that. Yeah, it created, but it failed to copy some files. Okay. Looks like a caching related issue, because if you see demo script, I don't have that role test folder at all, right? This looks like a caching issue. Yesterday when I was testing, I created all these folders, role test, etc. So it cached all that information somewhere. After that, I did not reboot or did anything with the system, so it's still looking at some older MOF which is cached in the WMI repository somewhere, and then it's trying to find that file which is not finding it. Okay, so let's not worry about that. That's a bug. Okay, so you'll find so many such things when you start working with DSC, but overall it's a pretty nice feature. You have the capability to go extend it yourself to custom resources, etc. Okay, and I'll show you how to combine these things also. For example, let's quickly go to the user part of it first. Okay, using a user resource, I said you can create new users, right? So, but what you have to do is you have to specify the password as a credential object. So that's what we do using get credential commandlet. So let's run this and see, and then we'll go to the group and understand how that can be done. It's a DSC user. The user I want to create is test user. I'm specifying a password, which let's say it is password. Okay, now I have that running. So I can say this as user test. So it's creating my new user. Now that also failed because again there is an issue there. It did not create the user. Once again, it looks like some caching related issue here. Let's do one more thing. I'll open it in a different console altogether. Well, see, this I created that user. So it's basically to do with something to do with caching. So test user is now created, right? So similarly, you can use any of those resources. The examples are pretty self-explanatory. If you go to the TechNet website, you can see an example for each and everything. Registry is the most straightforward thing. And once you have these resources, you can actually combine them to perform bigger tasks. For example, I'm here creating a group, and then there is also a user here. The name is same, test user, so we don't have to really worry about it because it's already there. It should work. And one thing that you have to observe is this requires statement here. Requires equals to. What I'm basically specifying is in square brackets here I specified the resource, which is user, and what is the name of that? I specified user example here. So now when I run this configuration, what happens is the user example resource will be run first to check whatever has to be done within this block is performed. In this case, it has to go create a user. Because it's already present, it doesn't do anything. It won't even throw any error there. And then it comes here to the group example and then sees what has to be done. If the group is not present, it goes and creates my local group and then adds this test user as because we specified members to include equals to test user. Okay, so it's basically adds that user, and that's one of the reasons why I said this requires this resource. The group example requires user example resource, because without having this user, if you try to run this, it will fail because it won't find test user to include in the group membership. Okay, let's run this quickly and see. Let's do it from the other window. DSC group, it's created. So I'll just do this group test. You can actually see in the verbose output that the user example executes first. Also group example is given in the configuration above user example. Okay, so if you see, because that user already exists, it directly goes to the group example. I hope it created the group. Let's see. Well, it didn't. So let's do one thing. Let's remove this test user and then run again. Problem again. We are running a wrong one. Sorry guys, we are running a wrong one. We have to run the multi-user thing. So we have to run that multi-role configuration. Basically ask me credentials, test user. I run that and then run the multi-users. We were running group test, which was not required actually. So we run the multi-role test. It should do that. So as you can see, the user example is running first and then the group example runs. It should have created both. Okay, my local group is created. Under that, if you see the members, test user is there. So test user should also be created here. Right, that's there. Cool. So that's how you can combine resources. You can combine resources and achieve a much bigger task. Okay. You can also parameterize, like for example, very similar to the functions. I can parameterize this, saying that $node name. So you can basically specify what computer name. Instead of hard coding it here, you can specify that from the command line and then replace this with $node name. This can be an array of computer also. Then you have to add all the $node name, node names.name or whatever. You have to create a hash of different computer objects and then use that hash here. So in this case, I just have one of them. I'm not specifying an array basically. So I just say $node name, and I can then use when I run this configuration data, I can use the -node name parameter and specify a computer name there. Okay, that's how it works. Now let's go back to these slides and quickly see what we have there. Okay, so we saw the how the configuration syntax is in DSC, and we saw how the resources are basically used. Some of them, not all of them actually. We only saw 4 or 5 of them. There are many, I think 11 of them there. So, if you go look at the technical documentation, this kind of syntax is pretty much same across all the different resources, and how they're used is pretty much same, right? So they're completely self-explanatory. You can just go experiment yourself there. Now, let's try to dig a bit into how DSC works. Okay. So for any configuration management, there are 2 aspects. Either you can push configuration or pull configuration. Okay. So this is quite debatable. Okay. Some people say push configuration type of management is the best one, or some people say pull kind of configuration is the best. I personally feel pull is the better mechanism of doing configuration management, because by the time node comes up, when node starts up, it automatically pulls the information from whatever known repository is and creates the baseline automatically for itself. Okay, so that's where the pull configuration is useful, and it's also kind of provides a complete automation. For example, in push configuration, what needs to be done is the way we have run all those scripts right now. If you have seen, I was running everything myself, you know, start DSC configuration. I'm specifying what configuration has to be pushed to the target node, right? So that is kind of a push configuration management. In pull configuration management, you don't have to do that. The target node automatically picks up the configuration and checks at regular intervals whether the baseline is maintained or not. If there are any discrepancies, it will go pull the configuration from the repository, apply onto itself. Okay, so that's where it is fully automated, and of course it is scalable because of that nature. Think of the push configuration. If you have thousands of computers, and if you have to manually push the configuration to those computers, right? It's not scalable method of configuration management. Okay, but it is simple, right? You just have to run one command and the configuration is pushed. But pull is not like that. Pull configuration, you have to create that pull server that acts like a repository, and then configure these servers, configure the target nodes to pull from the repository. Okay, so at least one time you have to push the onto the target nodes to make them pull configuration aware. Okay, so might be confusing, but what you can actually do is, there is something called pull server in the desired state configuration. Again, there are bugs today. We haven't got that working completely. But once you install this service, this is available on server 2012 and 2012 R2. So once you install this service, the server becomes a central repository and it can be used as a pull server. Now, what it basically does is it creates an IIS endpoint, which is a OData endpoint, and you can configure the remote nodes and set their desired state configuration. So the DSC setting itself is a resource that you can change. Okay, so using DSC itself, you can update the target nodes to pull from a pull server endpoint at regular intervals, and you can configure the frequency of those pull requests, etc. So all that can be done from DSC again. Okay, the local configuration manager runs on every server that you have installed, where you have installed PowerShell 4.0. That is the piece of software or the service that takes care of all your configuration management aspects. When you push configuration, that is the one who receives the configuration and checks whether the configuration applies or not, and if it has a drift or not, etc. Those aspects are checked by the local configuration manager. It has its own settings, right? So those settings can be again updated using DSC. That's the beauty of this whole framework. Okay, the DSC local configuration manager settings can be updated using DSC itself, and by updating local configuration manager settings, you're basically specifying that that computer either can pull configuration itself, or by default it is in push mode, so it expects you to push configuration to the target node. Okay, so that's how the local configuration manager works, and that's how DSC works. Now, I think that's it. We reached the end of this session actually. If you look at whatever I've talked about in last few minutes or so, DSC is the biggest thing in PowerShell 4.0. Rest everything is pretty minor in kind of the impact that it makes to whatever we do daily. Certainly some useful aspects are definitely there, but DSC is the biggest thing. And to build a complete cloud platform within the data center or the completely automated configuration management platform, DSC is the answer. Of course, you have third-party tools. Like I said, they have pros and cons. DSC has pros and cons. But being, if you have a completely Microsoft platform within your data center, I think DSC is the way to go do perform configuration management and make sure the baseline configuration is maintained and there is no configuration drift in your data center. So with that, guys, there are some references here. So the technical documentation is more or less full. You can actually go look at the desired state configuration overview and understand more about that. And also there was a TechNet video by Jeffrey Snover and Kenneth Hansen. So that's another excellent place where you can actually go see how exactly DSC works. Okay. All right, we can take any questions if you have. Hey Matt, I just unmuted you. Please go ahead.
Hi. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions, anybody? Yep. Come on up and you can ask him directly. So we've got one on its way, Ravi. Hold on.
Hi, this is Guru here. In the beginning of the session, you mentioned, you have publishing the online article regarding PowerShell. How to subscribe for that? Magazine, sorry.
Yeah, just go to PowerShellMagazine.com. It's an online magazine. So
okay.
you can subscribe to our RSS feed. Yeah.
Thanks. Anyone else have any more questions for Ravi?
Yeah. Is all configurations Microsoft pre-written or customer need to write their configurations?
So the question is, are all these Microsoft configurations pre-written, or do you need to write your own, Ravi?
Well, so the resources that I showed you in one of the slides, right? The set of resources. So if you see archive, environment, and entire list, this is a built-in resource list that Microsoft provides you with PowerShell 4.0 and DSC. And like I said, you can extend it to whatever you want. For example, I'm working on a sample where I manage a host file on multiple computers using DSC. Right. So today, managing host file is a pain for in a data center where hundreds and thousands of computers are there. So you can write a custom resource to go manage that yourself. Right. So yeah, it is completely extensible using PowerShell itself.
Okay. Thanks. Anyone else have a question? Okay, looks like not. So I'm pretty sure that's it for Q&A, Ravi.
All right, Matt. It's great being here, talking to you guys. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.